The selection, the titanium stylus, slipped from Dr. Marcus Chen's fingers, clattering against his laboratory desk as the first wave of dizziness hit. Through blurring vision, he watched the holographic DNA sequence he'd been annotating dissolve into meaningless swirls of light. The air around him grew thick, almost gelatinous, and the familiar scent of his laboratory's purified air system gave way to something sweeter, more alien. "Remarkable resilience," a voice observed. "Most subjects lose consciousness immediately." Marcus tried to turn toward the source, but his muscles refused to cooperate. The world tilted sideways, and he found himself suspended in a field of pulsing azure energy. Through the haze, he made out tall, elegant figures moving with liquid grace around him. Their bodies seemed to shimmer with a bioluminescent sheen, their features both beautiful and terrifying in their otherness. "Neural patterns stable," another voice noted. "Genetic profile confirmed. This is indeed our candidate." The darkness finally claimed him. When consciousness returned, Marcus found himself lying on what appeared to be a medical examination table, though unlike any he'd ever seen. The surface beneath him shifted slightly with each breath, adapting to his body's movements. The room around him was vast, its walls seeming to breathe with patterns of light that flowed like liquid mercury. Dr. Marcus Chen, a melodious voice addressed him. "Welcome to the Stellaris Nexus." He turned his head to find a tall figure approaching. She, for despite her alien features, there was something distinctly feminine about her presence, stood nearly 7 feet tall. Her skin had a pearl-like iridescence, and her eyes were pools of swirling silver. She wore what appeared to be living armor, its surface rippling occasionally like the scales of some cosmic serpent. "I am High Counselor Lyra," she continued. "We apologize for the abrupt nature of your recruitment, but our need is dire." Marcus attempted to sit up, finding his strength had largely returned. "Where am I? What is this place?" "You are approximately 247 light-years from Earth, aboard our central research facility." Lyra's expression shifted in a way that might have been a smile. "We have been watching your work on genetic resilience factors in human DNA with great interest. Your recent breakthrough in adaptive genetic markers was particularly impressive. You've been monitoring my research." Marcus's scientific curiosity began to override his fear. "How long?" "Since your first paper on evolutionary acceleration patterns." Another figure emerged from the shadows, shorter than Lyra, but radiating an even more powerful presence. "I am First Scholar Venna. We've spent decades searching for someone with your particular combination of insight and innovation." Marcus's mind raced with implications. Decades. But my first paper was published just 3 years ago. "Time flows differently here," Lyra explained. "What matters is that we found you, and not a moment too soon." "Our civilization faces extinction," Dr. Chen. "A genetic degradation cascade that threatens to unravel the very essence of who we are." Venna approached, holding what appeared to be a crystalline tablet. Images flickered across its surface, genetic sequences that made Marcus's eyes widen. "Our species evolved to near perfection millennia ago," she explained. "We achieved complete control over our genetic destiny, or so we believed. But we failed to account for the price of such rapid advancement." "Entropy," Marcus breathed, beginning to understand. "You've hit a genetic bottleneck." "Worse," Lyra said grimly. "Our genetic code is beginning to collapse in on itself. Each generation becomes more unstable than the last. We have perhaps 3 generations remaining before total systemic failure." Marcus studied the data streaming across Venna's tablet, his mind already beginning to form theories. The complexity was staggering, but within it he could see patterns, beautiful, terrible patterns that spoke of both incredible advancement and fundamental flaws. "This is why we need you," Venna said softly. "Your work on genetic resilience factors might hold the key to our salvation. Human DNA possesses something we lost long ago in our quest for perfection: the ability to adapt, to evolve, to survive against all odds." "You want me to help you reintroduce genetic diversity," Marcus realized. "But surely you have geneticists far more advanced than me." "We have knowledge," Lyra acknowledged. "What we lack is perspective, fresh eyes, human ingenuity. Your species has survived countless near-extinction events, emerging stronger each time. We need that resilience." Marcus stood, his scientific mind already racing with possibilities. The opportunity to work with technology centuries beyond Earth's current capabilities was tempting, but something else tugged at him. The fundamental drive that had led him into genetics in the first place. The desire to help, to heal, to solve impossible problems. "If I agree to help," he said carefully, "I need complete access to your genetic database. Full transparency about previous attempts, and—" he hesitated, then pressed on, "I need to know why you chose me specifically. There are other geneticists studying resilience factors." Lyra and Venna exchanged looks. "Show him," Lyra commanded. Venna manipulated her tablet, and a new image appeared. A genetic sequence that Marcus recognized instantly. His own. "Your DNA," Venna explained, "contains naturally occurring adaptations we've never seen before. Mutations that should be harmful, but instead make you stronger. You're not just a scientist who studies genetic resilience, Dr. Chen. You're living proof that the impossible is possible." Marcus stared at his own genetic code, seeing it with new eyes. All those years of studying adaptation and evolution, and the key had been within him all along. "When do we start?" he asked. Lyra's expression shifted into what was definitely a smile this time. "We already have. Trials of trust." The Stellaris genetic archives stretched endlessly before Marcus, a vast chamber where data crystals pulsed with stored knowledge spanning millennia. Each crystal contained the complete genetic history of a Stellaris lineage, glowing with a soft luminescence that reflected off the polished obsidian walls. After 3 days of continuous research, his eyes burned from studying the intricate patterns, but he couldn't stop. Not when each new discovery raised more alarming questions. "You're troubled," Venna observed, materializing beside him with the silent grace characteristic of her species. "You found something." Marcus gestured to the holographic display where genetic sequences twisted like ghostly serpents. "These markers here, they're not natural degradation. This was engineered." He turned to face her, studying her reaction. "Someone deliberately modified your species' genetic code, didn't they?" Venna's silver eyes clouded, a sign he'd learned indicated deep emotional disturbance among the Stellaris. "You understand why this information wasn't initially shared with you?" "Because it changes everything," Marcus replied, his voice tight with controlled anger. "This isn't just about helping your species survive. It's about undoing sabotage." "Who did this? When?" "The architects," another voice answered. High Counselor Lyra emerged from the shadows, her living armor rippling with patterns that reflected her agitation. "Our own genetic engineers 5 centuries ago. They believed they could perfect our evolution, accelerate our advancement beyond natural limitations." Marcus ran his hands through his disheveled hair, mind racing. "They succeeded, didn't they? But they didn't account for the long-term consequences. The changes brought immediate benefits, Lyra acknowledged. Enhanced intelligence, physical capabilities beyond anything we'd known before. Our civilization leaped forward centuries in mere decades. But then, the cascading failures began, Venna finished. Subtle at first, increased sterility, genetic instabilities that could be corrected with additional modifications. Each fix required more changes, more tampering, a cycle that couldn't be broken. Marcus turned back to the display, manipulating the sequences with practiced gestures. And now the foundation is crumbling. Every fix you've attempted has only accelerated the deterioration. He paused, studying a particular sequence. Where are they now? The architects. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken tension. Gone. Lyra finally answered. When the first major failures appeared, they attempted one final solution. It didn't end well. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. What happened? Venna moved to another crystal, activating its contents. A new hologram sprang to life, security footage from what appeared to be another research facility. Marcus watched in horror as the scene unfolded. Stellaris scientists, their bodies twisted by rapid mutations, their once beautiful forms corrupted by their own desperate attempts at genetic manipulation. They tried to force an evolutionary leap, Lyra explained, her voice hollow. They believed they could push past the degradation by triggering mass mutation. Instead, they created monsters. We were forced to quarantine an entire research outpost. 3,000 of our finest minds lost in a single day. That's why you brought me here, Marcus realized. Not just because of my research, but because I'm an outsider. Someone not bound by your scientific traditions or preconceptions. And because of what you are, Venna added softly, your genetic structure, it's unique even among humans. You possess natural adaptations that shouldn't be possible, yet they're stable, functional. You're living proof that evolution can find ways around seemingly impossible barriers. Marcus walked to another section of the archive, his mind working furiously. I need to see everything. Every failed attempt, every experimental result, even the classified files about the architect incident. No more secrets. Lyra and Venna exchanged glances. The High Council won't approve, Lyra warned. Those files are sealed for good reason. I don't care, Marcus insisted. You brought me here to solve an impossible problem. I can't do that if you're hiding pieces of the puzzle. Either you trust me completely, or this won't work. There are factions within our society, Venna cautioned, who believe we should accept our fate. They see our genetic degradation as punishment for our hubris, a sign that we've strayed too far from natural law. If they learn we're sharing our deepest secrets with a human, they already know. A new voice interrupted. All three turned to see another Stellaris entering the archive chamber. Unlike Lyra and Venna's pearlescent skin, hers was darker, with swirling patterns that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Her living armor bore elaborate markings of high rank. Arch and Mira, Lyra acknowledged, her tone cautious. We weren't expecting you. Clearly, Mira's gaze fixed on Marcus with an intensity that made him want to step back. The council is already divided over this human's presence. Now you want to give him access to our most guarded secrets. He needs to understand what he's dealing with, Venna argued. We can't expect him to succeed where our own scientists failed if we handicap him from the start. Mira moved closer, studying Marcus with unnerving focus. And what do you think you can accomplish, human? What makes you believe you can solve a problem that has defeated the finest minds of a civilization thousands of years more advanced than your own? Marcus met her gaze steadily. Because I'm not trying to defeat it. on trying to understand it. Your scientists saw this as a problem to be solved through brute force, more modifications, more controls, more attempts to bend nature to their will. But evolution doesn't work that way. Sometimes the path forward requires taking a step back. Interesting, Mira's expression shifted subtly. You suggest we should devolve, abandon centuries of advancement. No, Marcus turned back to the genetic displays. I suggest we learn from your mistakes. Evolution isn't about perfection. It's about adaptation, survival. Your ancestors engineered themselves into a corner by trying to achieve perfection. The solution isn't to push harder in the same direction, but to find a new path entirely. Silence fell over the archive chamber as his words hung in the air. Finally, Mira spoke again, her tone different now. Given access to everything, she commanded. All of it. If we're going to trust our future to this human, let's see what he can really do. As Mira turned to leave, she paused. But remember, Dr. Chen, if you fail, you won't be the only one to suffer the consequences. The architects thought they could play gods too. Their hubris doomed thousands. Don't make the same mistake. Marcus watched her go, then turned back to the genetic sequences floating before him. Somewhere in this vast repository of knowledge, hidden in the failures of the past, lay the key to the Stellaris survival. He just had to find it before time ran out for all of them. Breaking protocol. The holographic chamber pulsed with waves of crimson light as Marcus presented his findings to the Stellaris High Council. 20 of the most powerful members of their civilization sat in a semicircle before him, their expressions ranging from intrigue to barely concealed hostility. His heart pounded, but his voice remained steady as he delivered news he knew would shake their society to its core. The solution isn't modifying your existing genetic code, he stated, manipulating the floating DNA strands with practiced gestures. It's creating an entirely new evolutionary branch, a fusion of Stellaris and human DNA. The chamber erupted in chaos. Councillors rose from their seats, their bioluminescent patterns flashing with agitation. Archon Mira's voice cut through the tumult. This is precisely what we feared. He wants to pollute our genetic legacy with primitive human DNA. Listen to me, Marcus pressed on, expanding the holographic display. Your ancestors' modifications created a genetic architecture that's too rigid, too perfect. It can't adapt to new pressures. But human DNA, specifically my DNA, contains something unique. A kind of genetic flexibility that could reintroduce the ability to evolve naturally. First Scholar Venna stepped forward, her silver eyes intense. Explain the mechanism. Marcus highlighted specific sequences in the display. These markers in my DNA shouldn't work together, but they do. They create a kind of genetic redundancy that allows for controlled mutation, natural evolution without catastrophic failure. If we can integrate these sequences into Stellaris DNA, we could restore your ability to adapt while preserving your advanced traits. And create a hybrid species in the process, another councillor spat. We would no longer be pure Stellaris. You haven't been pure Stellaris since the architect's first modifications, Marcus countered, his frustration breaking through. Every attempt to maintain that artificial purity has only accelerated your decline. Nature demands diversity. Evolution requires change. High Councillor Lyra raised her hand for silence. Show us your simulations. Marcus nodded, activating a new series of projections. The chamber filled with swirling genetic patterns, showing the projected outcomes of his proposed fusion. In every simulation, the hybrid DNA stabilizes within 3 generations. The resulting beings retain all critical Stellaris capabilities while gaining human adaptability. More importantly, they can reproduce naturally without technological intervention. And what of the failures? Arch and Mira demanded. Show them the failed simulations as well. Marcus didn't hesitate. Here they are. Yes, some simulations showed genetic instability, but far less severe than your current degradation. And unlike your present situation, these problems correct themselves over time through natural selection. Natural selection. Another counselor scoffed. You expect us to subject our children to evolutionary pressure, to watch some fail so others might succeed. That's exactly what I expect, Marcus replied firmly, because the alternative is watching your entire species fail together. Perfect survival isn't an option anymore, but adaptation, real, natural adaptation, offers a future. Venda moved closer to the genetic displays, studying them intently. The integration patterns are remarkable. I've never seen anything like this. The human sequences don't override our DNA. They complement it, create new possibilities. Because that's what human DNA does best, Marcus explained. We're not perfect. We're not even close, but we survive. We adapt. We evolve. And right now, that's exactly what your species needs to learn to do again. Lyra stood, her living armor rippling with complex patterns. What you propose goes against everything we've believed for millennia. Our ancestors fought to rise above the chaos of natural evolution. To return to it would be an admission of failure, Arch and Mira finished. An acknowledgement that all our advancement, all our perfection, was a mistake. No, Marcus corrected. It would be an evolution of your philosophy, as well as your biology. True perfection isn't static, it's adaptable. Your ancestors reached for the stars, but in doing so, they forgot that stars themselves are born, live, and die in an endless cycle of cosmic evolution. A younger counselor leaned forward. How would we begin? We start small, Marcus replied, bringing up new diagrams. Controlled trials with synthetic embryos, carefully monitored for stability. We proceed in stages, learning and adapting our approach based on results. No rushing, no desperate measures like the architects tried. We work with nature, not against it. And you would oversee this process. Mira's tone was dangerous. A human directing the future of our species. No, Marcus shook his head. I'll provide the initial framework, but your scientists will need to learn to understand and manage the process themselves. This isn't about replacing your knowledge, it's about combining it with new perspectives. Silence fell over the chamber as the council absorbed his words. Finally, Lyra spoke again. We will need time to deliberate. This decision cannot be made lightly. With respect, Marcus replied, time is the one thing you don't have. Your genetic degradation is accelerating. I estimate no more than 6 months before the damage becomes irreversible. You need to decide now. Hold on to your concept of perfect purity and face extinction, or embrace change and survive. The tension in the chamber was palpable. Marcus could see the weight of millennia of tradition warring with the desperate need for survival in the councillor's eyes. He had given them the truth, shown them a path forward. Now everything depended on whether they could overcome their own prejudices and fears. Venda moved to stand beside him, her presence a silent show of support. I volunteer to be the first, she announced. Let my genetic line be the first to attempt this fusion. One by one, other councillors began to rise, signalling their support. But Arch and Mira and her followers remained seated, their expressions hard. This isn't over, she warned. Some of us will not stand idle while our species is corrupted by human DNA. Marcus met her gaze steadily. No one is being forced to participate. But you don't have the right to deny others the chance to survive. As the council chamber emptied, Lyra approached Marcus. "You've started something that cannot be stopped," she said quietly. "I hope you're prepared for the consequences." "I am," Marcus replied, turning back to the genetic displays. "The question is, are you?" The uprising. The first warning came in the form of failing containment fields. Marcus watched in horror as the carefully maintained stasis chambers housing the experimental embryos began to flicker. Alarms blared throughout the research facility, their urgent wails echoing off pristine walls. Sabotage, Venna declared, her fingers dancing across control panels. Someone's overriding the facility's security protocols. "Mira," Marcus growled, already moving to the backup systems. "Can you stabilize the fields?" Before Venna could answer, the facility's doors sealed with a thunderous boom. Through the transparent walls, they could see squads of armored Stellaris security forces moving into position, their weapons charged. "This is Action Mira," a voice boomed through the facility's communication system. "By order of the Conservation Council, this facility is now under quarantine. The human genetic corruption ends today." Lyra burst into the laboratory, her living armor in full combat configuration. "We don't have much time. They're charging the facility's purification protocols." Marcus's blood ran cold. He knew what that meant. Complete molecular breakdown of everything within the facility's walls. "The embryos, they're stable. They're working. We can't let them destroy everything now." "We won't," Venna assured him, activating hidden controls in her workstation. The floor beneath them hummed to life. The architects may have failed, but they weren't fools. They built escape routes into every major facility. The laboratory floor split open, revealing a glowing transit tube. "The embryos," Marcus protested, looking at the stasis chambers. "Already transferred to secure storage," Lyra replied, pushing him toward the tube. "We've been preparing for this possibility since you first proposed the fusion." The facility's walls began to vibrate as the purification sequence initiated. Marcus could see Mira's forces attempting to breach the laboratory's sealed doors, their weapons leaving scorch marks on the reinforced barriers. "Go," Lyra commanded. "Get to the civilian levels. Venna will guide you to the backup facility. I'll hold them here." "They'll kill you," Marcus objected. Lyra's armor pulsed with fierce patterns. "They can try. Our species survived this long because we're stronger than they know. Now go." Marcus and Venna plunged into the transit tube, electromagnetic fields carrying them deep into the heart of the Stellaris complex. Behind them, they heard the sound of combat erupting in the laboratory. "The civilian levels aren't safe," Venna explained as they emerged in a vast underground chamber. "Mira's been spreading propaganda, claiming your experiments will lead to the death of our pure bloodlines." "But we have supporters too," Marcus observed, noting the groups of Stellaris citizens moving purposefully through the chamber, many wearing symbols he recognized from the pro-adaptation faction. "More than Mira knows," Venna agreed. "Many of our people are tired of watching their children suffer from genetic failures. They're ready for change." They hurried through crowded corridors, trying to blend in with the civilian population. But they had barely made it halfway to the backup facility when emergency barriers began slamming down throughout the complex. "Attention all citizens," Mira's voice echoed through the chambers. "The human Marcus Chen has released a genetic contaminant into our atmosphere. Report any sightings immediately. This is not a drill. She's trying to turn the population against us." Marcus realized as fearful looks turned their way. Indeed, a new voice agreed. They spun to find themselves surrounded by a group of Stellaris civilians. But instead of hostile faces, they saw determination and hope. First Scholar Venna, one of them stepped forward. "We received High Counselor Lyra's signal. We're here to help." What followed was a desperate race through the complex's service tunnels, with civilian supporters creating diversions and blocking security forces. Marcus marveled at the complexity of the resistance network. Clearly, preparations for this day had been long in the making. They finally reached the backup facility, hidden behind holographic walls in an abandoned industrial sector. Inside, Marcus found something that stopped him in his tracks: dozens of stasis chambers, each containing successfully fused embryos. "How?" he began. "We've been running parallel experiments," Venna explained. "While Mira focused on the main facility, other supporters helped us establish this backup operation. The results have been even better than we hoped." But their relief was short-lived. Alarms began blaring throughout the backup facility. On the security feeds, they could see Mira's forces converging on their location. "They're jamming our transmissions," one of the resistance members reported. "We can't call for help." Marcus looked at the stasis chambers, then at the desperate faces around him. They had come too far to fail now. "We don't need to call for help," he declared. "We need to show everyone the truth. Evolution's promise." The backup facility's central chamber hummed with tension as Marcus initiated the final sequence. Around him, Stellaris resistance members worked frantically to reinforce their defenses, while Venna coordinated with their remaining allies throughout the complex. "The stasis field modifications are ready," Marcus announced, his fingers flying over the control panels. "When Mira's forces breach the facility, they'll get exactly what they're looking for, but not what they expect." The plan was audacious, perhaps even foolish, but they were out of options. The first explosion rocked the facility's outer walls. On the security feeds, they could see Mira leading her forces personally, her armor configured for full combat. "Broadcast channels are ready," Venna confirmed. "Every public display in the complex will show what happens here." "Good," Marcus nodded. "Let them come." The doors burst inward in a shower of molecular disruption fields. Mira's forces poured into the facility, weapons charged, but they froze at what they saw. Marcus stood calmly in the center of the chamber, surrounded by active stasis fields containing the hybrid embryos. Each field pulsed with healthy, stable life signs. "Welcome, Arction," he said quietly. "I believe these are what you're looking for." "Abominations," Mira snarled, raising her weapon. "You've corrupted everything we are." "Have I?" Marcus challenged. "Look closer. Really look." He activated the central display, and the chamber filled with floating genetic sequences, but not just from the hybrid embryos. Side-by-side comparisons showed the original Stellaris DNA, the degraded modern sequences, and the new hybrid patterns. "Your ancestors' modifications were brilliant," Marcus explained, his voice carrying to every corner of the complex through the broadcast. "But they made a crucial mistake. They tried to eliminate chaos entirely, to create perfect order in your genetic code. But life requires both order and chaos, structure and flexibility." He highlighted specific sequences. "These hybrid embryos aren't corrupted, they're complete. The human DNA segments don't weaken your genetic structure. They provide the flexibility it's been missing. Look at the stability readings. Look at the adaptation potential." "Lies," Mira insisted, but there was uncertainty in her voice. "No more lies," Lyra's voice rang out. She entered the chamber, wounded but alive, supported by a group of council members. We've independently verified everything. The hybrid embryos are viable, stable. They represent our future. A future of impurity, Mira countered. Of weakness. A future of survival, Marcus corrected. Of evolution. Your ancestors reached for perfection, and they achieved something remarkable. But true perfection isn't an end state. It's the ability to keep growing, keep adapting, keep becoming something new. He gestured to the embryos. These children will have everything that makes the Stellaris great. Your intelligence, your strength, your connection to advanced technology. But they'll also have something you lost. The ability to face the unknown and adapt to it. To evolve. Throughout the complex, they could hear the murmur of voices as the population watched the confrontation unfold. The genetic sequences told a story that couldn't be denied, a story of hope. Mira's weapon wavered. "Even if you're right," she said quietly, "how can we accept such change? We've defined ourselves by our perfection for so long." "Perhaps that's the greatest evolution needed," Venna suggested. "Not in our genes, but in our understanding of what perfection truly means." One by one, Mira's forces lowered their weapons. The tension in the chamber shifted from hostile to contemplative as Stellaris scientists moved forward to examine the data for themselves. "It's not too late," Marcus offered. "Your genetic line could be part of this new chapter. Not an end to the Stellaris, but a rebirth." Hours later, as the complex slowly returned to normal operations, Marcus stood with Lyra and Venna in the central chamber. The hybrid embryos pulsed with steady life signs, each one representing a bridge between two species, two ways of understanding life itself. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now," Lyra replied, her living armor reflecting patterns of hope and determination, "we evolve, not just our bodies, but our minds, our society, our understanding of who and what we are." "It won't be easy," Venna cautioned. "Change never is. But for the first time in generations, we face that change with the ability to adapt to it." Marcus watched the genetic sequences dance before him, human and Stellaris DNA intertwined in patterns of infinite possibility. He thought of Earth, of humanity's own journey toward the stars. Perhaps this was just the beginning of a much larger evolution, not just for the Stellaris, but for both their species. "Perfect," he said softly, and smiled.